There's a boat on the open ocean, somewhere in the eastern Pacific, hundreds of miles from any shore. It's moving slowly across calm water, the way a small fishing vessel moves when no one on board is in any particular hurry. And then, in a single frame, it's gone. A flash, a fireball, and a column of black smoke rising off the surface where the boat used to be. That video is real. It was filmed from above, from an aircraft or a drone, and it lasts only a few seconds. The strange part isn't that it exists. The strange part is who released it. It wasn't leaked by a whistleblower or smuggled out by a journalist. The United States military posted it themselves on social media with a short caption explaining that the people on board were narco-terrorists, that the vessel was operating along a known trafficking route, and that the strike protected American lives. No names, no photographs of anyone on board, no drugs shown floating in the water afterward, just the boat, the explosion, and the next post in the feed. And here's the thing that's hard to get your head around. This wasn't a single operation, it became a pattern. Since the early days of September 2025, the American military has been hunting small boats across the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific, striking them from the sky one after another. By the summer of 2026, more than 200 people had been killed, over 60 boats destroyed, and in nearly every case, the public was given no evidence at all that those boats were carrying anything illegal. To understand how something like this becomes routine, you have to go back to a quiet decision made months earlier. The administration had designated several Latin American drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. On paper, it sounded like a bureaucratic relabeling. In practice, it changed everything, because if you're fighting terrorists, the government could argue you're in an armed conflict, and armed conflict runs on a completely different set of rules than policing does. In law enforcement, you arrest, you gather evidence, you prove guilt in front of a court. In war, you're allowed to strike a target directly without any of that. So once the cartels were reclassified as combatants, the small boats they were said to use became, in the military's eyes, legitimate targets, not suspects to be stopped and searched, targets to be destroyed. The strikes began in September, under a task force operating through US Southern Command. The first one set the tone for everything that followed, but not in the way anyone expected. According to reporting later, confirmed by multiple outlets, the initial strike on that first boat didn't kill everyone aboard. There were survivors in the water, clinging to the wreckage of what was left. And then a second strike came down on them. The Pentagon's explanation, when it finally emerged, was that the survivors were thought to be salvaging cargo and possibly signaling other boats, which meant they were still considered part of the fight. The defense secretary later said he'd watched the opening moments of the operation on a live feed, then left for another meeting, and only learned afterward that a follow-up strike had finished the job. The commander who ordered it, he said, had made the right call. That single detail, 2 men killed while holding onto a broken boat, set off a quiet war inside Washington. Some lawmakers and legal experts called it a possible war crime, pointing to the long-standing rule that you cannot kill an enemy who is shipwrecked and no longer fighting. Others in the administration insisted it was perfectly legal, and while they argued the strikes didn't pause for even a moment, they simply continued. Week after week, the announcements arrived in the same clipped language. 3 killed in the Pacific, 4 in the Caribbean, 8 across 3 boats in a single night. The numbers stacked up steadily, each one attached to a short video, and the same recurring phrase: the vessel was transiting along known narco trafficking routes and engaged in narco trafficking operations. That sentence became the entire case. How did they know the boats carried drugs? Known roads. How did they know the people were traffickers? Known roads. The road was the accusation, the evidence, and the verdict, all folded into one line. By the time the death toll crossed 200, the campaign had become something the public had almost stopped noticing. Part of that was the way it was packaged. Each strike was small on its own, just a handful of people at a time, easy to scroll past. And part of it was the framing. The president claimed that every boat destroyed saved 25,000 American lives, a figure he stated not as a guess, but as a hard fact. The people who studied this for a living weren't convinced. Some pointed out that the math behind that number simply didn't hold together. But the deeper problem was geographic. The fentanyl killing tens of thousands of Americans every year doesn't arrive on speedboats in the open Pacific. It comes overland through official border crossings, hidden in cars and trucks. Even if every single boat that was struck had been packed with drugs, the experts argued, it would barely move the needle on overdose deaths back home. The operation was hammering a road that the people who actually tracked the drug trade didn't consider a major artery at all. But the videos kept coming, and slowly the campaign grew into something larger than itself. Other countries were invited to take part. Regional leaders were encouraged to launch their own versions. What had started as a string of isolated strikes was hardening into a model, a template for how this kind of force could be used again somewhere else. And underneath all of it sits the question that never really gets answered. Who were these people? The military called them narco-terrorists. Critics suggested that at least some of them may have been fishermen, migrants, or low-level couriers with no real connection to any cartel leadership. The honest answer is that we don't know, because no independent investigation has confirmed their identities, and no official list of the dead has ever been released. Over 200 human beings, and most of them have no names in the public record at all. They exist now only as small shapes on a boat in a few seconds of grainy footage, moments before the screen turns to fire. When the Secretary of State was finally pressed on it in front of the Senate, asked plainly what the military actually needed to see before deciding to kill the people on a boat, his answer circled back to the same place. A legal officer was present for each strike. The intelligence confirmed the routes and the activity. The same words, the same closed loop. There's a version of this story where the administration turns out to be right, where every person on every boat was exactly who they were said to be. The intelligence was solid, and these strikes quietly disrupted operations in ways the public will never be allowed to see. That version is possible. It might even be partly true. But the only version anyone outside the operation can actually verify is the one playing out in public. For the better part of a year, the most powerful military on Earth struck small boats in international waters, killed more than 200 people, and offered the rest of us not a single confirmed piece of evidence that any of those boats were carrying drugs at all. The footage is still out there. You can find it in a few seconds. A boat drifting across the water under an open sky, the engine still pushing it gently forward, and then the flash, and then the smoke clearing over an empty patch of ocean, while somewhere in an office far away, the next strike is already being prepared.